So, a couple of years ago, I was out having a beer with a couple of my friends on my terrace. It was a cloudy, drizzly day, and we were all talking about our childhood days. It was a good day. I got up to go to the table with the ice box to get another beer when suddenly everything blacked out. Next thing I saw, I was suddenly at a train station which looked from the 1800s. I don't even know if trains existed then, but based on the architecture of the station and people's clothing, it felt around that time period. I was standing under a giant clock trying to make of what this place was and what had just happened when I realized I had a ticket in my hand which said first class reservation from Brussels to Mechelen. At this point, I would like to clarify I'm from India, and back then I still hadn't traveled to Europe. So at that moment, I was still very confused as to where I was and why I had this ticket in my hand. I felt a sense of urgency as the train was ready to leave, and the clock under which I was had struck 2:15 p.m. and the departure time had already passed. The train was still at the platform, blowing its old steam horn. The engine looked brand new, but it was a steam engine like the olden days. I was completely baffled by what was happening at this point. And at this point, I saw a man staring directly at me. He was wearing a penguin suit and wore a tall hat and had a huge mustache. His look was more of one wherein I felt he knew something. Something like I wasn't supposed to be there. Just that moment, everything snapped back, and I remember lying down on my terrace with both my friends standing over me terrified. I was back at my terrace. I asked them what had happened, and they told me what they saw. They said while I was walking to the table with the ice box, I froze stiff and fell on the ground as if a statue. I was out for hardly 2 or 3 seconds. They saw me falling and came running calling out my name, and I just came back to my senses. The feeling was very weird because they said I was out for hardly 2 or 3 seconds, but what I remember from my experience, I was there for at least 10 to 15 minutes, closely watching everything and everyone around me. To this day, I believe I somehow slipped into another reality, and that man who looked at me, the face of whom I still remember very clearly, I'll never forget. That man somehow realized my slippage into another time period and somehow sent me back. It was early March when they arrived in their large metallic crafts. A bright blue hue illuminated the land around them. When we first saw them up close, they looked almost human-like, but with grey, wrinkled skin. The first country they arrived at was India. Upon arriving, they fell to their knees and begged in an unknown language, pointing at the skies. The locals looked at each other, speechless and afraid. After 3 minutes of begging, they hurriedly moved on to the next country, then the next, each time more desperate than the last. With every country they passed, we collectively felt more and more uncomfortable around their motives. We all sensed that they had no intent to harm us, but there was something off about their arrival. The last stop was the United States. After yet more failed communication attempts, the beings defeated left in their vehicles and away from Earth forever. It was heavily debated about what they were begging about, until someone on an online forum brought up that they weren't begging, and more speculation occurred. It was only 3 days later, after leaving Earth, that a cryptic message was sent out on the radio waves, which the states intercepted and kept highly classified as they hurriedly deciphered the message. 2 days later, a whistleblower released part of the transcript. "We are sorry we let them hear. Forgive us. It's now early May and the skies have begun to shine an unnatural purple. The clouds have all but disappeared. They have arrived, and I don't think they are here to beg. Looking at what we are up against, I think we might have to."